Imagine standing on the blood-soaked fields of ancient Rome, the air thick with smoke, the cries of dying soldiers echoing across the horizon. Titans of strategy and brutality ruled here, men whose names alone could send shivers down the spines of emperors and enemies alike. These were not mere generals, they were living nightmares, commanding legions with ruthless precision, crushing rebellions, and leaving a trail of fear that spanned continents. From legendary victories to merciless punishments, their reputations were etched in terror. Today, we unveil the 10 most feared generals of the Roman Empire, masters of war whose shadow still haunts history. The Roman Empire wasn't built on luck. It was forged in blood, sweat, and relentless strategy. Behind every conquered province and every victorious battle stood generals whose names struck fear into hearts both near and far. These men were architects of war, shaping the destiny of Rome with each calculated move on the battlefield. Some commanded legions with unmatched discipline, others with sheer brutality, leaving entire cities trembling at the mere mention of their arrival. Their victories were legendary, their punishments merciless, and their cunning unmatched. But what made these generals truly feared wasn't just their skill in combat. It was the psychological hold they had over friend and foe alike, the aura of invincibility that surrounded them. In this journey, we delve deep into the lives, battles, and dark reputations of the 10 most feared generals of the Roman Empire, uncovering the men behind the myths and the terror they inspired. Contextual background. To understand the fear these generals commanded, you must first grasp the relentless machinery of the Roman Empire. Rome's legions were not mere soldiers. They were elite machines of war, drilled to perfection, bound by loyalty and fueled by ambition. Every battle mattered. Every campaign could decide the fate of an emperor, and every misstep could mean annihilation, not just for the army, but for entire cities and provinces. Roman generals were more than tacticians. They were emperors in miniature, wielding power over thousands of men and shaping the destiny of nations. Their strategies were studied, feared, and often copied, but never equaled. The battlefield was their stage, and fear was their weapon. A general's reputation could precede him like a dark cloud, turning allies into cautious observers and enemies into trembling supplicants. From the rugged hills of Gaul to the scorching deserts of the East, Rome's enemies learned quickly that facing the Roman army often meant facing not just soldiers, but living legends of terror. The careful planning of ambushes, the ruthless discipline enforced among troops, and the merciless treatment of traitors all combined to cement the aura of invincibility. By the time a Roman general appeared on the horizon, entire regions would brace for the coming storm. And it is into this world of calculated brutality that our 10 most feared generals carved their terrifying legacies. General 1, Gaius Marius. Few names in Roman history carry the sheer weight of fear like Gaius Marius. Rising from humble beginnings, Marius transformed the Roman army into an unstoppable force, introducing sweeping reforms that would shape Rome's military for decades. But it wasn't just his tactical genius that made him feared. It was his unyielding ruthlessness and political cunning. Marius demanded absolute loyalty, and betrayal or failure meant swift, merciless punishment. In battle, his legions became extensions of his will. Marius mastered the art of strategic surprise, often striking enemy camps before they even realized Rome was near. Tribes across Gaul and North Africa learned quickly that encountering Marius's forces often meant facing annihilation, not negotiation. Legends tell of his cold, calculating gaze surveying the battlefield. Every movement precise, every command executed without hesitation. His enemies didn't just fight Rome, they faced a man who redefined war itself. Even fellow politicians and commanders regarded him with wary respect, knowing that Marius's influence extended far beyond the battlefield. In many ways, fear was his currency, and he spent it lavishly, leaving a trail of terrified adversaries and awed allies in his wake. Gaius Marius wasn't just a general. He was a symbol of Rome's unstoppable military might. General number 2, Lucullus, Lucius Licinius Lucullus, known simply as Lucullus, was a master of both strategy and psychological warfare. While many generals relied on brute force, Lucullus understood that fear could be as potent a weapon as the sword. His campaigns against the formidable armies of Mithridates in the east were marked by meticulous planning, relentless pursuit, and the kind of discipline that made even seasoned soldiers quake. Lucullus' brilliance lay not only in his battlefield tactics, but also in his ability to strike fear into the hearts of his enemies before a single clash occurred. Cities would surrender at the mere sight of his banners, knowing resistance meant total annihilation. His legions moved like shadows across Anatolia, cutting off supplies, ambushing reinforcements, and leaving destruction in their wake. Tales of his campaigns spread across kingdoms, painting a portrait of a general who combined ruthlessness with cunning. Even within Rome, Lucullus's name carried weight. Fellow commanders envied his skill and feared his ambition, while soldiers revered his tactical mind. To face Lucullus in battle was to confront a force that seemed omnipresent, a commander whose very presence could break the morale of an entire army. His legacy wasn't just victories, it was the psychological grip of terror he cast over the East, a testament to the power of fear as a weapon of war. General 1, Pompey the Great, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, famously known as Pompey the Great, was a general whose reputation alone could turn the tide of war. With unmatched charisma and brilliant tactical foresight, Pompey commanded the loyalty of thousands, molding his legions into precise instruments of fear and domination. His campaigns stretched across the Mediterranean, from the rebellious cities of Spain to the turbulent coasts of the East, leaving a trail of conquered territories and humiliated enemies. What made Pompey truly feared wasn't just his skill with armies, it was his ability to anticipate and manipulate his adversaries. He studied enemy movements with a strategist's mind, often striking before opponents could even organize a defense. Tales of his swift, decisive attacks spread far and wide, causing entire regions to surrender without a single battle. Soldiers whispered of his uncanny ability to appear where least expected, turning ambushes into spectacles of Roman efficiency. In Rome itself, his rise caused unease among politicians and rival commanders. Pompey's influence, built on victories and public adoration, was a reminder that power in Rome came with blood, strategy, and fear. For those who faced him on the battlefield, It was not just combat. They confronted a living legend whose presence could crush morale before the first sword was drawn. Pompey the Great was, in every sense, a master of war and terror. General number 4, Julius Caesar. No name in Roman history commands awe and fear quite like Gaius Julius Caesar. While many generals earned reputations through strategy alone, Caesar combined unmatched military genius with psychological dominance that turned ordinary soldiers into unwavering instruments of conquest. From the cold, misty rivers of Gaul to the sun-scorched plains of Egypt, his campaigns left enemies decimated, cities trembling, and legends of fear etched across the empire. Caesar was a master of timing and surprise. He struck swiftly, often before his opponents could muster their defenses, and his meticulous attention to battlefield details left no room for error. His legions were disciplined, fiercely loyal, and molded into extensions of his mind, executing maneuvers that seemed almost impossible. Tales of his ruthlessness spread far beyond the battlefield. Rivals feared not only his sword, but the cunning political mind that could destroy careers, families, and entire cities with calculated precision. Even his own soldiers acknowledged the aura of invincibility surrounding him. Marching alongside Caesar was both an honor and a terrifying reminder of the stakes. Survival depended entirely on discipline and obedience. To face Julius Caesar in combat was to confront a force of nature, a man who redefined warfare and struck fear into the hearts of all who dared oppose Rome. His name became synonymous with power, strategy, and terror, leaving an indelible mark on history. General number 5, Crassus. Marcus Licinius Crassus, often overshadowed by his contemporaries, was a general whose cunning and audacity made him one of Rome's most feared commanders. While history remembers him for immense wealth, it was his military prowess and ruthless tactics that struck terror across enemy lands. Crassus's campaigns were marked by calculated brutality, most notably against the rebellious slave army led by Spartacus. His relentless pursuit and strategic encirclements left adversaries with no escape, demonstrating a cold efficiency that instilled fear far beyond the battlefield. Crassus understood that war was as much psychological as physical. He punished disobedience and rebellion with swift, uncompromising severity, turning towns and regions into cautionary tales. His enemies whispered of legions that could strike without warning, of traps meticulously set to crush even the boldest challengers. Even within the Roman Senate, generals and politicians were wary of his ambition, knowing that Crassus wielded both power and influence with ruthless precision. Despite his later failures, Crassus's reputation during his prime was formidable. Soldiers respected his cunning, and enemies dreaded facing him in battle. Every campaign he led carried the weight of inevitability, a shadow of fear that preceded his arrival. Marcus Licinius Crassus was not just a general. He was a living warning, a man whose ambition and strategy left indelible terror in the annals of Roman history. General 6, Scipio Africanus, Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus, the man who would crush Hannibal and turn the tide of the Second Punic War, was a general whose name alone struck terror across Carthage and beyond. From his youth, Scipio displayed a strategic brilliance that would become legendary, combining bold maneuvers with an uncanny understanding of both his enemy and the battlefield. To face him, was to face a mind that anticipated every move, every retreat, and every weakness. Scipio's campaigns were marked by precision and psychological dominance. He often used fear as a weapon, forcing opponents to question their own strategies before the battle even began. At the Battle of Zama, his disciplined legions executed complex maneuvers that left Hannibal's forces disoriented and defeated, solidifying Scipio's reputation as a tactical genius. Cities surrendered at the mere rumor of his approach, knowing resistance meant total annihilation. But Scipio's terror was not born of cruelty alone. It stemmed from unmatched intellect and unwavering confidence. Soldiers trusted him implicitly, knowing he would lead them not just to victory, but to glory, while enemies could only anticipate the nightmare of facing his calculated wrath. Scipio Africanus became more than a general. He became a symbol of Roman supremacy, whose very presence on the battlefield could break armies before the first clash of swords. General number 7, Trajan. Marcus Ulpius Trajanus, simply known as Trajan, was more than an emperor. He was a general whose campaigns expanded the Roman Empire to its greatest territorial extent, and whose name alone inspired awe and dread. Unlike many of his predecessors, Trajan combined measured strategy with relentless ambition, leading his legions across mountains, rivers, and deserts with precision that left enemies scrambling in fear. Trajan's conquest of Dacia remains one of his most legendary feats. With meticulous planning and a deep understanding of both terrain and enemy tactics, he turned difficult campaigns into decisive victories. His legions moved with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine, and towns fell under his shadow without even a single battle in some cases. To face Trajan was to confront a force of nature, a general whose strategic mind could outmaneuver entire armies, and whose discipline and charisma inspired unmatched loyalty among his troops. Yet Trajan's fear factor extended beyond the battlefield. Enemies whispered of a leader whose patience was as sharp as his sword, someone who could wait for the perfect moment to strike, crushing opposition when least expected. Soldiers respected him, allies admired him, and adversaries feared him. Trajan's campaigns left an indelible mark on history, proving that true fear lies not in brute force alone, but in the mastery of strategy, leadership, and unwavering determination. General 8, Marcus Agrippa. Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, though often overshadowed by emperors he served, was a general whose tactical brilliance and unflinching courage made him one of Rome's most feared commanders. Agrippa's genius lay in his ability to blend innovation with precise execution, turning the tide of battles through strategy that seemed almost prophetic. His victories weren't just earned, they were meticulously orchestrated, leaving enemies in awe and terror. Agrippa's most legendary achievement came during the naval battles of the war against Antony and Cleopatra. His fleet moved with unparalleled coordination, crushing opposition and securing Rome's dominance over the Mediterranean. Even before the first clash, stories of his ingenuity spread fear. Enemies knew Agrippa could outthink, outmaneuver, and outfight them at every turn. His legions, trained to perfection, followed his commands without question, executing complex formations and maneuvers that seemed impossible to rival generals. But Agrippa's fear factor extended beyond the battlefield. Political rivals and enemies alike recognized his influence and ruthlessness. Understanding that defiance could have consequences as severe as defeat in war, soldiers revered him for his leadership, yet feared the relentless discipline he demanded. Marcus Agrippa's legacy is a testament to the power of intellect, innovation, and unwavering command. A general whose presence alone could break the will of his enemies and cement Rome's supremacy for generations. General number 9, Septimius Severus. Lucius Septimius Severus, later emperor, was a general whose name alone could instill dread across both soldiers and enemies. Rising from the provincial reaches of Africa, Severus proved that determination, strategic brilliance, and sheer ruthlessness could elevate even the most unlikely candidate to legendary status. His campaigns were marked by unrelenting discipline and a precision that made opposition crumble under the weight of Roman organization. Severus's fear factor wasn't merely in his victories, but in the meticulous way he planned every campaign. He knew the psychology of war. Intimidation, deception, and timing were as critical as swords and shields. Enemies often surrendered before even engaging, anticipating the total annihilation that followed those who resisted. His legions were fiercely loyal, trained to execute complex maneuvers that left opponents disoriented and overwhelmed. Even within the walls of Rome, Severus commanded attention. Politicians and rivals understood that his influence, forged through battlefield victories, could tip the balance of power. Soldiers admired his leadership, but respected the edge of danger he carried with him. Septimius Severus's campaigns extended Rome's reach and solidified his reputation as a master of both fear and warfare, proving that true terror is cultivated through intellect, strategy, and the ability to strike decisively when the moment demands. General number 10, Agrippa Postumus. Agrippa Postumus, though less celebrated than some of his peers, earned his place among Rome's most feared generals through a combination of raw power, tactical cunning, and unyielding ruthlessness. A man born into privilege, yet tempered by the harsh realities of politics and war, Agrippa Postumus became a figure whose very presence on the battlefield sent shivers down the spines of both allies and adversaries. His campaigns were a study in precision and intimidation. Every maneuver was calculated to maximize impact and psychological pressure, forcing enemies to question their own strategies and often surrender before the first clash. His legions, trained under his relentless discipline, moved with a synchrony that left rival armies vulnerable and unprepared. Cities that resisted faced devastating reprisals, while those who capitulated often did so out of sheer terror of what defiance would bring. Even within Rome, whispers of his ambition and lethal capability circulated among senators and commanders alike. Allies admired his courage, but understood that disloyalty could prove fatal, and enemies knew that confrontation with Agrippa Postumus was a gamble few could survive. His combination of strategic brilliance, commanding presence, and psychological warfare ensured his legacy endured as one of the most formidable generals of the Roman Empire. Agrippa Postumus was not merely a commander. He was a living embodiment of fear, power, and the relentless might of Rome. As we reach the end of our journey through the 10 most feared generals of the Roman Empire, it becomes clear that their power was not born from swords alone, but from strategy, discipline, and an unshakable presence that commanded respect and instilled fear. Each general, from Lucullus's psychological mastery to Agrippa Postumus's ruthless precision, represents a lesson in leadership, strategy, and the art of war. Their victories were not simply victories of arms. They were triumphs of mind, will, and unwavering confidence. What made these men legends was not just their ability to defeat enemies, but their capacity to dominate the battlefield mentally before the first arrow was fired. They understood the intricate dance of fear and respect, using both to maintain authority and achieve results impossible for ordinary commanders. Soldiers followed them, not only out of loyalty, but out of awe for their genius. Enemies faltered before even facing them, recognizing the inevitability of their defeat. This reflection is more than a history lesson. It is a reminder that true power comes from preparation, understanding, and decisive action. Just as these generals commanded armies with precision and confidence, we too can navigate challenges in our lives with focus, strategy, and courage. By studying their methods, we uncover insights into discipline, leadership, and the human psyche. The fear they inspired is a testament to mastery, the kind of mastery that turns ordinary men into legends. Let us take inspiration from these stories, channeling determination, strategic thinking, and bold action to conquer our own battles, leaving a legacy that echoes through time.